Hello and welcome, and in today's video I'm going to discuss the question of when Fritz Todt realized that the Second World War could not be won for Nazi Germany. And I think we can see here a progression, and we can say more or less exactly when he realized that it wasn't going to end well. So as this summer of 1941 began to turn to autumn, the leadership of the Third Reich was ecstatic. True, the war was still on and the Soviet Union hadn't collapsed in 6 weeks as Hitler initially forecast, but the greatest military victory in human history had taken place. That is to say, the Battle of Kiev, fought over thousands of square kilometers. It destroyed huge Soviet armies, and the Soviet Union had taken a loss of over 700,000 men. That's never happened before, and as things stand, I don't think it's ever likely to happen again. So when news reached Hitler's headquarters late on the 19th of September that Kiev was finally in German hands, the dictator entered a period of expansive speculation about the future of the continent. And then for days afterwards, he spoke at length of his plans, what he was going to do, conversations carefully recorded by Werner Kerpen, who was the liaison officer of Alfred Rosenberg. And at this point, I'd like to say a few words about Werner Kerpen. He was born in Leipzig in 1910. He spent 18 months at Führer headquarters until the 1st of March 1943, and as such he's an important witness because he was around until the 1990s. And if you go to the website of the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum, you can find there a long interview which dates to 1989, and so you're getting first-hand information from somebody who's normally not quoted at all. And he's giving information also on other things as well, such as, for example, he was there during Kristallnacht in the beer cellar, and he was actually a witness to the behaviour of the old fighters, which I think then bears out things which at the time weren't known, but being borne out now about Goebbels' diary in Kristallnacht, and that it was in fact Hitler's responsibility. There's also a lot of information on Werner Kerpen in the Munich City Archives, should anybody also want to follow that one up. But anyway, we'll go back to Fritz Todt, and so Kerpen's there on the 19th of September, and it's lunchtime, and he noted that Fritz Todt was also there, and he had just been to Oslo and to Trondheim, and he had also taken part in the first ground being broken for a major traffic link between Germany and Denmark. Now, Hitler responded to this quite enthusiastically. He outlined his vision for Norway. Trondheim, he declared, was to be rebuilt afresh in terrace form so that every house would receive sunlight throughout the day. From there, he spoke of grand arterial projects. One motorway was to run north to Trondheim. There was another one which was to go south to Crimea. After the war, he said, the German citizen would be able to drive a Volkswagen across the conquered territories to see them in person, and thus develop a personal attachment which would make him willing to fight for them if necessary. Germany must never repeat what Hitler described as the pre-war mistake of allowing the colonial idea to become the preserver of a few capitalists or corporations. Railways traverse distance, he argued, but roads truly opened them up. And to a large extent, I think I have to agree with that, but I live in a motorhome, and I would. Hitler had this idea that when motorways were built, they had to take scenic routes. And this is something I personally do. I always follow scenic routes wherever possible. And I think Todt actually also agreed, because some of them appear, in my opinion, to have been put in places which were scenic. Maybe there was other reasons why they had to be built there, which I'm unaware of. Anyway, we'll deal with that another time. So, Todt, I'm sure, was absolutely delighted with all of this, and he was really enthusiastic. And not only that, we see the same pattern a month later, 17th of October 1941. Todt dined with Hitler, and Fritz Todt is there, and both men were exhilarated by what they had seen in the conquered lands in the Soviet Union. And it was Hitler once more, he's dreaming of these vast construction schemes that would remake the conquered territories. Once more, Kirpin recalls that roads must be laid. Todt was told his original projects would have to be expanded considerably, and for this purpose he could draw on 3 million prisoners, which would be taken and could be used over the next 20 years. Hitler spoke out of the highway to the Crimea and others, such as roads even now to the Caucasus, and 2 or 3 major routes through the northern parts of the Soviet Union. These highways were to pass through areas of the greatest scenic beauty. And where major rivers were crossed, German cities were to arise as centres of the Wehrmacht, police administration and party authority. Along these roads, German farmsteads would be established, transforming what Hitler described as the monotonous Asiatic steppe. In 10 years, he claimed, 4 million Germans would be settled there. In 20 years, at least 10 million. And these people would come not only from the Reich, but also from the United States or other countries in America, Scandinavia, Holland and Flanders. Obviously, we're thinking of Germans who had actually left to go to the United States. Yet beneath these expansive visions lay a growing unease about the course of the war itself. Franz Halder recorded that Hitler increasingly anticipated a situation in which neither side would win, and so neither side able to destroy the other, so there's going to have to be a negotiated peace. The spectre of a second Verdun clearly haunted his thinking. There was even a condescending tone in his remarks about Stalin. Since the Soviet leader had fought so well and so fearlessly, as Hitler suggested, he might deserve to be spared a fate. Maybe he could be used for something as well. So this mood found sharp echo in Hitler's exchanges with his armaments minister. So when Todt returned from a tour on the 29th of November 1941, there was now a completely different situation. It was quite stark. Now, in view of the arms and industrial supremacy of the Anglo-Saxon powers, Todt warned Germany could no longer win the war militarily, and Hitler responded with what must be said uncharacteristic calm. And he asked, well, how am I supposed to end this war if only by military means? I can't see a way of ending it politically. Can you? Words to that effect. So what has happened now is something's gone wrong in November of 1941. Now, this is before the Soviet counterattack, and the United States isn't in the war yet. Todt has done a tour. He has seen the fact that the advance is stalling. It's that they can't get the right things to the front, and there's fewer and fewer German soldiers to carry this out. Admittedly, though, they were still going against a very weakened Red Army. Now, but despite this pessimism, Hitler remained confident that certain technical domains lay firmly within his own personal expertise, and he reckoned he knew all about tanks. And so at this meeting, he feared that the tank's usefulness was coming to an end for its offensive purposes. Now, I did a video not so long ago where I'm arguing that tanks will once again come to the fore. Now we have seen in Ukraine that the huge amount of tanks which have been lost to drones are not. But I think that because armors keeps coming backwards and back, and so there'll be something to replace it. There'll be some way of stopping the drones. Hitler this time he was I can't really understand why he thought this. Did he think that because the anti-tank weapons were getting so strong that it would stop the effectiveness of the tank? in view of the fact that he thought the tank wasn't going to be much use very close in the future, he believed that the Panzer divisions had to do the job now, otherwise it's going to be too late. This in return required the construction of bigger tanks in greater numbers, capable of outclassing British and Soviet models. Now, the sheer scale of Soviet tank production had shaken him very badly. When Todt told him on that day that he'd examined 2 additional Russian types at Oriel, Hitler burst out in exasperation, asking how such a primitive people could achieve such technical results in so short a time. So what Todt had clearly seen was a T-34, which had been, he was able to calculate how quickly they could knock the things out, and it was impervious to the majority of German anti-tank weapons. The majority, not the 88, of course. So, once, and also at this conference, 29th of November 1941, Hitler warns Todt and Walter von Brautisch that the age of the tank, as it was coming to an end, that he saw 3 basic designs, and that's what they needed to concentrate on. So there'd be something like a medium tank based on the Mark IV, heavy tank like this, which had to outclass the Soviet T-34. So I suppose in time this was to be the Panther, and it needed some kind of a light reconnaissance vehicle such as the Mark III. I think that one thing that has come up with hindsight was the fact that Nazi Germany produced too many weapons. There was no standardization, and whereas other countries, sort of the Western Allies, sort of concentrate on the Sherman tank and the Soviets on the T-34, but the huge amount of models produced by Nazi Germany, I mean, it might be interesting to look at them and all the rest of it, but it does mean to say that spare parts and all sorts of other problems will develop as a result. And if you've got a Mark IV there, then suddenly some Tigers turn up or something like that. Yeah, but if your Tiger then breaks down, you're not going to cannibalize, possibly won't be able to cannibalize the part from the Mark IV. So this thing of spare parts, and this is something actually, in my opinion, Hitler clearly didn't actually even understand that. He seemed to think that he just produced things from scratch rather than get parts to actually fix things with. But this clearly is putting pressure on the German arms industry, and the Wehrmacht's needs were growing more acute. On the 3rd of December 1941, Todt and Hitler were flying in the plane, and Hitler dictated a decree to Todt, probably that Todt brought the suggestion up, and then Hitler dictated back to him that there had to be a simplification and expansion of arms production, and future manufacture was to be concentrated in the most efficient factories producing standardized, unsophisticated weapons by mass production. And so it was here clearly that Todt had begun to do a radical restructuring of the arms industry, and this is associated with Albert Speer, but bear in mind that Albert Speer wasn't to come onto the scene until more than 2 months later as far as the arms were concerned. Now, on the 10th of January 1942, Hitler ordered industry to revert to preferential treatment of the army's needs, even at the expense of the Luftwaffe and Navy, though he insisted that long-term objectives remain unchanged. What does this mean? I would suggest that he realised that he wasn't going to conquer the United Kingdom. Later in January, Todt outlined further reforms directly to Hitler. Arms combines would be made responsible for supervising their own projects, and a fixed price contract system would replace existing cost-plus arrangements in an attempt to impose discipline and predictability on production. So until a fixed price is, right, you're getting 100x for that lorry, for example. But previously, it had worked on the system whereas the arms manufacturer would present the bill, so these are our costs, and then they had a fixed amount for profit margin, so it's between 3 and 6%, for example. So you've got something there. It's cost, for argument's sake, 10 million Reichsmarks, and then you get an extra 3% on top of that for your profit, for your shareholders, or for as dividends. And it worked like that. And this plan, fixed price, would put a stop to it. And you could see why, for example, Hermann Goering, who was head of the 4-year plan and incredibly corrupt, why he mightn't be so keen on a fixed price system, because that would mean there was less for him. In fact, a lot less for him. It was still possible. It's still corruption is possible within a fixed price system, because obviously the prices have to be fixed by somebody, and who's dictating what the fixed prices are. But it has less room for manoeuvre than the previous turnover on cost-based system. So, in the first days of February 1942, Fritz Todt was in Berlin, and he was operating from the Armaments Ministry and the Organisation Todt apparatus at a moment when the German war economy was now under acute strain. So the winter of 1941-42 had exposed deep structural weaknesses in armaments production, transport and fuel supply, and Todt was convinced that Germany had reached the limits of what its industrial system could sustain under assuming existing strategic assumptions. His work in Berlin during this period was certainly focused on producing a report for Hitler, which would be an absolute blunt assessment. And we've seen that Hitler didn't go berserk with Todt. So he could talk to him more or less frankly. It's worth also bearing in mind that this is now after the wave of sackings on the Eastern Front, when Hitler and the stand fast order, that Hitler sort of taking over control of the military. Now, the statistics available to Todt in early February painted a stark picture. Armaments output at the turn of 41-42 was depressed, and it was depressed so much that in later periods this would be used as the baseline. So if you put a baseline at 100 and then you do all your figures from there, and this was used to show increased production under his successor. Albert Speer did this, and I mean often you see this. I mean it's a very common trick when people actually produce statistics depending on the result they want to achieve. If they want to show things how bad things are, they'll pick the baseline as being when things were really good, or vice versa. The significance, though, of the baseline is not really statistical, of course. It's the reality of the armament system as it stood, and it was then constrained by bottlenecks that could not be simply solved by having exhortations or ideological will or belief in the Führer or things like that. I mean, you can believe all you want in the Führer, but if the trains are stuck in a traffic jam, and the trains are stuck in whatever the jam is, a train jam, and that's a belief in the Führer is not going to remove whatever it is jamming them all up. Steel production, the indispensable foundation of all weapons manufacture, showed only marginal growth between 1941-42, indicating that German industry was already operating close to a hard ceiling. There was no hidden reserve of capacity that could suddenly be unlocked to meet an ever-expanding demand from the military. So coal figures, if you take them in isolation, then they appear okay. But Todt understood that aggregate output concealed the real problem. Now, the winter crisis of 41-42, and there had been a crisis the previous year, because if you just have to read the reports of how cold it was in Berlin, for example. So we read in Berlin Diary that how William Shiver's work, how people used to come to him to keep warm, and anyway. But in 41-42, it was even worse. So the coal effectively was in the wrong place. There was rail congestion because of the coal being in the wrong place, frozen infrastructure, competing military priorities, and these meant that power stations, steelworks, armaments plants all experienced shortages, even when the coal, in theory, existed on paper, and it was certainly in big supply yards, but it couldn't be moved. So it was transport and distribution, not extraction, which had become the decisive limiting factor. This in turn fed back into steel output, chemical production, and the manufacture of explosives and ammunition. And just to quote actually Albert Speer now, he said that they decided to get a young officer to tell them what it was like on the Terek, which is in the Caucasus, or heading towards the Caucasus, in 1942. And the officer told Hitler, yeah, but we didn't have any ammunition. And Hitler came to the conclusion, see, the problem is you're not manufacturing enough ammunition. That wasn't the problem, as Speer said. It was the problem we couldn't get the ammunition to the front. So fuel statistics. This also was pretty pessimistic, really. Synthetic fuel production was rising only slowly and remained far below what would be required for large-scale mechanized warfare, expanding air operations and training programs. At the same time, Germany's fuel position did not yet face the catastrophic collapse which would later come in the war. But the trend now was, though, pretty obvious. The system could either support stabilization or expansion, but not both. Continued offensive operations in the Soviet Union, combined with ambitious armaments targets and ongoing prestige construction projects, were mathematically incompatible. On the 6th of February 1942, Todt had completed his preparations and made ready to travel to Hitler at Rastenburg. So this wasn't a routine visit, I think. Now, I think that Todt intended to confront Hitler directly with the implication of these figures, and would argue that Germany couldn't win a prolonged war of attrition against the Soviet Union under existing economic circumstances. So he flew there on the 7th of February 1942, and he met Hitler in person. Now, what they talked about, we don't know, but I think we can guess. Todt probably laid out the core of his armament arguments, that it was systematic exhaustion. There was no way of really expanding the production of steel without radical prioritization. Coal shortages were a transport problem, but then again, to sort those out, then the transport system has to be sorted out. Fuel availability placed strict limits on operational mobility. All of these together, these constraints that meant that current military planning was divorced from economic reality. And later, Hitler was to say on time of retreats that his generals didn't understand economic reality. So what was the meeting like? Well, again, we don't know, do we? But I can imagine being somewhat tense and somewhat inconclusive. And Todt wasn't optimistic, and he didn't offer any reassurance. But he may well have said that Germany was approaching economic overreach. Now, it's worth bearing in mind what had happened. There'd been a complete collapse in the east, that the Soviets, in fact, by this time, in some places, had advanced some 200 kilometers to the west. There were large pockets of German troops sort of isolated. Had the Soviet Union behaved in a different way, the military, the Red Army, and concentrated its attacks, it could have indeed, I think, maybe even knocked Nazi Germany out of the war. I think maybe, okay, I'm not saying it would have done, but I can see certain areas where it could have attacked. Instead, Stalin chose to attack in little parcels across the entire front, from north to the Kerch Peninsula in the south. So it's not they could thank Stalin for doing this. Also, there's a big thing else. The United States was now in the war. Hitler had taken it upon himself to declare war on the United States. Now, they might have taken some comfort on the fact that the Japanese arm were running amok in the Pacific, defeating the Americans, the British, the Dutch, and everyone else. But there, where they were, East Prussia, 7th of February 1942, it didn't actually look good at all. So, Todt spent the night there. Then he got on his plane, and plane blew up shortly after takeoff. And the other bit we know from Albert Speer's book, Hitler rang him up, and he was appointed successor. Now, the statistics Todt had struggled to force into the strategic conversation didn't disappear, but under Speer they were now to be reframed, reinterpreted, and later presented as evidence of dramatic success. And this, as I said earlier, it's using the winter crisis of early 1942 as the baseline. Hitler was profoundly shaken by the loss. Now, there'd been tens of thousands of Germans had been killed in the war up until now, but this was the first one of Hitler's entourage to be killed in the war. I think we can look at this as a military death, if you like, because he was killed in a Heinkel 111, and there had been accidents with Heinkels 111s in the past, a military plane. And so this now actually touched Hitler's circle, and it would seem that he actually liked Todt. He liked him so much that he ordered the Air Ministry to come up with some kind of cockpit recorder to be installed in future aircraft so that the causes of accidents could be understood. Todt had a state funeral. Hitler almost immediately returned to Berlin to attend the funeral, and there is, in fact, I've got the newsreel of this state funeral, which I might actually upload, but if I can find a suitable commentary of my own to put onto it. There you have it. Now, I would like to address very quickly at the end the claim made by some that Hitler might have had something to do with the death of Todt. No way. Now, it had been Stalin. Yes, Stalin would have had him arrested and shot. Putin, yes. Putin would have had him thrown out of a window or something like that. Yeah, and no doubt in my mind whatsoever in those two cases. But Hitler didn't do that. Hitler he didn't, for example, even Rundstedt, who told me at the end of the war 2.5 years later, and he only got the sack. And so Todt would have been retired for health reasons or something like that, or he had too much on. They'd have found a reason. He would have stepped down. Hitler didn't bump people off for this reason. So anyway, thanks very much for listening, and I hope you found that interesting. And so I upload every day at 2000 hours my time. So I'm based in Poland and in Germany. That's where I normally live. I'm now in the UK, as you can tell, because that's a British siren which is outside. And I do longer videos like this on Tuesdays and Fridays, and other days I do shorter videos. Now, I also have a membership of this channel. Membership costs £5 or €6 or $6, and it currently gives you access to more than 800 videos. Okay, most of them are quite small, but there are some longer ones like this one as well. I also have a request. Please, underneath, can you write a comment? Now, my problem with YouTube is this algorithm. The algorithm likes to see lots of things happening in the comment section, right? So please write something down there. I have to face AI slop. I cannot compete with AI slop burying my material so that new people can't actually find it. So I'm clearly doing research history. Research costs money. AI slop, you go into Gemini, Google's AI machine or whatever, and a tool, and Gemini will make videos for you. And so these videos made by Google's own AI tool are those which YouTube prefers. So it's competing with that is really very, very difficult. Not only that, I have to face fake copyright claims. I have to put up with strikes on my videos because YouTube makes a mistake and doesn't like it. None of these things happen to those doing AI slop. So this is the problem. And until there is a suitable alternative to YouTube, I'm sort of stuck here. So if you can do one little thing, please do that. Just say, comment, hi, that's all you have to write. That's all that's necessary. Thanks for listening, and bye for now.